Welcome to episode 11 of That Reminds Me Of. We are looking today at La Llorona.
La Llorona. Hey, we got the title of the episode right today as well. For this episode, that's exciting.
Yeah, well, I think that's because I was running that show.
That's because you did it.
Never let you do it again.
Yeah, that's right. Keep me away from the introduction. Clearly. La Llorona.
The only way I know how to, or not how to pronounce it, but how to rhyme it is by thinking my Sharona.
Yes, I love it. Or Corona, my Corona.
My Corona, correct?
Because it's not Mexican, it's Guatemalan, but I think some of the film was made in Mexico. I saw in there.
And apologies for. I'm going to make this apology on behalf of you as well for pronunciation ahead of time.
Great idea.
Yeah? Great idea.
We're going to mess it all up, as usual. And I noticed when I was listening back to them talk about Llorona,
yes.
They were saying Girona or something like that. So
I think that's just like I don't know, a slangy dialect.
Okay.
So similar to how, we in Australia might say Saturday.
Okay, cool. Because when I learnt Spanish, two L's was a y sound or a l sound. So that's all I got. That's all I know.
Yeah, I think it's La Llorona.
Okay, great. Decided.
Well, my wife is from the country next door, from El Salvador.
Oh, really?
So they're one and the same. You would think I'd do a better job.
She should know. Did she tell you?
Oh, no, she told me. I just can't pronounce what she tells me it really is.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, that's fine. We've come across this so many times in this show already. Like Korean names, couldn't say those. So whatever. It's to be expected now. We're just too Aussie.
French titles.
French titles, big time. We couldn't even say duh properly, so instead of thee. So there you go.
That's true.
It's just who we are. We have to embrace it now.
Yeah.
We can do our best each time. That's what we'll promise you.
Yeah. Okay, mate. So can't even do Aussie properly.
Can't even do that right.
No.
Oh, what do you do? So this is the second film in the dark thriller pack that we have watched as part of the MIFF 68.5 film festival experience, which has been pretty great so far. And I think we should talk about what this film was about before we talk about what we thought of the film. Should we do a little synopsis?
I think it's your turn to do a synopsis for this one. Right. So go for it.
Okay, so the film is set in Guatemala. Now, I had a date in mind and it's lost on me now. Do you remember when?
I don't, but it would have to be fairly 1970s, 80s.
Yeah, that feels about right. So the film follows a family and the head of the family is, he was a dictator, I guess. He's General Enrique, right? And he has since retired or has been overthrown. He's probably not been overthrown, but he's just not in power anymore. That's the feeling you get, right? Or because he's sick, he's lost his kind of power. And he's currently sort of going to court because there's charges against him. He's got Alzheimer's. And at this time in his life, his family all kind of huddled around him and social unrest happening on the streets of Guatemala all around their compound. A ghost from his past decides to visit and haunt the family. And I don't know why she's waited this long, but she has. And what you end up with is a female victim from his sort of pillaging and raping days who's come and entered his house in the guise of a servant, and she slowly starts to unravel the whole family. And there's a constant threat of awful things that might happen, but it's a very restrained film. Not actually very much happens. There's just a lot of kind of maybes and, promises of mayhem that don't quite pan out the way you think they are.
Yeah, in many respects, that's a bit the same as the last film that we reviewed
That's right.
Rose plays Julie. This, always sort of, what's the word? threatening for something to happen.
To me, it's a theme of this pack of films. I think they're quite well themed in that they are dark thrillers, but they're also very restrained dark thrillers. Like there's not a lot of bang going on. There's a lot of threat, but not a lot of bang.
Is that what psychological thriller kind of means?
I guess so, yeah. Although I still expect in a psychological thriller for some sort of massive payoff towards the end.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I think the interesting thing for this one for me is that it is well and truly grounded in real history events. Yeah, like the Mayan Holocaust. So where they've killed a whole bunch of this native population in Guatemala. So, and I don't know. I don't know if the characters are real or based on or what they are, but the events I think are real.
I've been meaning to look up Don Enrique if there was any sort of reality there, if he's a fictitious dictator that they've used to sort of get the same concept across. Do you know?
No, I don't. But the fact that it's so rooted in history like that, it did make me think of one thing, and that's with all the mayhem in America at the moment with Black Lives Matter type stuff. I was watching something recently that was talking about killings in American history, and you'd have African American people who weren't aware of these atrocities that happened in their towns, maybe 100 years ago or whatever it might be, and they're horrified because the history books haven't taught them this important stuff about their history. So in watching this one, I felt, wow, that's so awful. Why on earth do I not know this?
Yeah.
How is it that we're having to fumble around and say, is that real or is it based on
right?
They should have a better PR, that this has happened. And there's so many things like that around the world, but that to me was almost the point of the film. So I struggled with, I think I read in a review somewhere, it might have been on the MIFF site, it blends poetics and politics, and I mainly saw politics.
Interesting. Yeah, I think I agree. It was hard to judge what we were watching exactly without having a better understanding of what the politics of that country is and what the history is, because it felt almost preachy at times, but you don't, if you're not intimate with it, you don't really know what it's preaching about and where it's sort of taking license and where it isn't. And I agree. I found it a little confusing at times in that respect. I also found that it's more of a paranormal thriller, really, isn't it? Like as a paranormal thriller, it was leaning on a lot of other films that have come in the past, and it was doing a lot of the same little, creepy turns that you expect in these films, and the same almost jump scares, and haunting, I guess, like flashbacks to the past, and that's why the haunting's happening and all this sort of stuff. But it didn't seem to really do that well enough to sort of stand as a paranormal thriller on its own 2 feet, which again is why it felt a little muddled and confused. Like, are we watching something about the politics of this time, or is it being a paranormal thriller? Didn't really feel like it was doing either very well.
You've just nailed my problem with it, I think, and the main problem being it not doing the Conjuring sort of horror thing well enough to be classed as that. I probably would have preferred it as a documentary style about
Yeah. Yeah,
about
absolutely.
the actual thing that happened.
I think one of the clever so while it didn't nail all of those elements, it did some clever things. And one of them was I really enjoyed the moment where, well, probably just back to the beginning a little bit. I think one of the more interesting characters in this film is the wife of
Absolutely.
the dictator. Like and the film opens on her. So I think the filmmaker knew she was the most interesting character. And she was also probably the one that a little bit happens with the daughter as well, but she's probably the one that learns the most and kind of is most impacted and probably most able to accept the kind of the guilt and the charges laid against the family, because the husband's too far gone by that point. He's like off in his own la la land, whereas she's the one who can kind of accept the charges laid against them by this ghost in a way. And the film starts on her and the film kind of ends on her as well. So I think the filmmaker knew what he was doing there.
And did that well. Her narrative arc was really, really solid.
Yeah, totally. One of the really interesting choices that I liked was that the flashbacks at a certain point of the ghost's past suddenly throws this woman, the wife of the dictator, into the role of the Mayan mother who's being dragged around by soldiers and beaten, watching her kids getting killed and all this awful stuff. But she's playing the part. And I just thought that was really cool. That was such a great move.
Yeah, it was cool. And when you compare it to the first scene when she's there praying in a really, really upper class kind of environment where she's got everything together, and there's such a fall from it's not really a fall from grace. It's just an unraveling of all the artifice to the point that she sees what is really happened and what the world is, what her husband is. And like at the start, she's defending him, isn't she?
She is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's saying, well, that's what men do, and he's always been one to sort of chase women, particularly native women. She's just kind of shrugging it off.
Blokes, man.
Sorry?
Blokes in both of these first two films, they're just we're a bunch of pricks.
I know, that's a good point. In both of it's true. In fact, there's a real theme across this bundle of masculinity kind of gone wrong, isn't there?
Definitely. Yeah. I like how in this film the portrayal of men and women was really stark at the end. It was as though they were trying to say something really early on, because we opened with all the women praying and it was only women.
Yeah.
And then it went to all the men in power in a political situation, and then back to, I think, the servants who were all women. So I felt they were making a very clear point. I'm not sure what it is other than to make it about men and women separately.
It's interesting. So this director, Jayro Bustamente, I can't say his name properly, but I'm sure it's something like that.
I think it's probably Jayro,
something like that. Yeah. He's made a few films. I don't think any of them are horrors or paranormal films, but he seems quite political and he's got like social messages that seem to be a theme through them. I think that's some of the stuff that he did the best in this film. And also, I've never seen a film with so many still single shots. Like every single scene, almost every single scene is a single shot. It's not moving. It's just a locked camera. That's unusual. And at first I was a bit uncomfortable. I was sort of like, what are we doing? This is a bit weird. But then by the end of it, you kind of, you're fully absorbed into the style of storytelling. And then a couple times he cuts mid-scene to another character, and then that started to like throw me off. Like, whoa, wait, we're cutting now? You can't start cutting halfway through the film.
If you're going to make the rules, stick to them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I was quite enjoying never seeing that character. I just hearing his voice off camera somewhere, and then you cut to him. That's bizarre. you know?
Yeah, I love it. I love it when that's done. Woody Allen does that well, I think,
Yeah.
juxtaposing the visual and the audio being somewhere off camera. I didn't notice it in this film though. So you're
Oh,
saying I
almost
probably
every shot, every scene is a single shot.
yeah.
Uh, and it's like he's gone very carefully. What is the one place I can put a camera in this room where I will capture everything that's required to tell this scene?
Yeah.
And he will find that spot, lock it, and go, okay, done. Let's go,
Job
everybody. Job done. Run the scene. And then the next scene is that again. Yeah, it's quite amazing.
There was some nicely framed scenes and scenes that played out nicely. I didn't see that as a something that was repeated, to be honest. But there was a scene where the three generations of women were sitting on the stairs. I thought that was quite a nice visual.
Yeah. Yes.
And said had a lot of subtext, I guess. The other one I enjoyed was the in the courtroom where the witnesses, whether be they victims or witnesses, I wasn't sure, but all the Mayan women coming up and having their say, and they would say it in their language, and then you'd have to wait and listen to it all in their words, then they would translate it. I just thought, firstly, the framing of the shot, it was powerful, but also the timing was really, really cool.
And he's made a couple films where they speak that native language. I want to say, I'm going to murder it, Kakchikel, something like that.
That must be exactly. I trust you to know exactly how it's pronounced.
That's exactly how it's pronounced. But anyway, it's a really interesting language to listen to. It's got these sharp little crunchy bits to it, which are really, to my ear, are interesting in themselves. And I think he's aware of this. So to have them just speak the language and then have someone translate it, pretty clever. It's cool.
Yeah, I think it was I respected the fact that they played that long in order to get that across to show that the sound of the language is important, and
the women are all veiled and wearing really interesting traditional clothing. It was quite an impactful scene, that one. And of course, the stories they're telling are horrific.
And I'm sure it'd be more impactful if you had all the background, I assume.
Yeah. Well, I suppose if you imagined this film in an Australian setting, you get a sense of how impactful that would be if these were Aboriginal stories being told about massacres and basically genocide. That would be so. I suppose it's a similar thing for Guatemala.
It's funny you say that, because that's exactly what I was thinking as I was watching it.
Yeah.
I was trying to work out my own personal way into understanding the film, and I was thinking if it was an Australian one and it was an Indigenous story that we're overlaying with this horror element, would I buy it? And I probably thought maybe I would.
Yeah,
but I'm still not sure.
Hey, did you ever see The Nightingale?
No.
Jennifer Kent's second film that she made after The Babadook. I haven't seen it yet, but I wonder if The Nightingale is kind of that film. It's something I need to go see. It's been on my list for a while.
Don't judge, but I haven't seen The Babadook yet.
Oh, really? Yeah.
It's been on my list for ages. Clearly.
One other thing, this film was in 4:3. Did you notice that? No, it wasn't. This one wasn't.
No,
the other
this
film
one wasn't. We'll get to that. No.
It feels like these films are taunting me now. They're just. Anyway.
Yeah, I think we need to talk 4:3 next episode. I think that'll probably take 30 minutes just on that.
I'm getting confused with my films now. There you go. So, any other thoughts about this one? Any things you loved or hated worth noting?
Well, a couple of talking points, I suppose. The the father, did you have any sympathy? Like, basically what we're dealing with here is
Yeah.
someone who has been a monster, done monstrous things, but then we see him as a very vulnerable old man. And I feel like I've seen that in other films or stories. I can't remember what they are, but
Yeah.
it just made me think: where, at what point do you actually have sympathy for the man?
I didn't have a lot of sympathy for him. I don't know
No,
why.
me
I didn't.
either. I didn't
It
either.
didn't. And I feel like they could have played that so that you do, but he's just so unlikable from the start.
Mm. Yeah, I agree.
And I don't know what that is exactly. Well, no, I do. They don't give him. He's not given any redeeming features. You know.
Do you wish he was, though? Like, and that may be where, because it's got a political overlay or undertone, maybe it's difficult to make him complex. But as a film, as a story, I would have preferred to be a bit torn, to think, okay, well, there's the human inside the monstrous acts.
I think particularly because this is happening inside his home to his family, that would have been a cool play. I agree. Yeah, and it wouldn't have been that hard. It probably wouldn't have been that hard to give him something so that you feel like, there were a couple of little human moments in there, but even those were sort of patronizing and not very likable. You know, like there's a moment where he tries to sort of comfort his daughter, and that comes off as just patronizing and just like something that an old grumpy dude would say. You know, like there's nothing you can really hold on to with him.
No,
and therefore in the end, you know, of the story, I didn't feel very strongly for him either, you know, when it gets to the end.
Yes, and to me that's, on balance, maybe a flaw.
I think it's a flaw. I think so too. Yeah, I think that if you can make your villain, and I think he is the villain in this story, because you're kind of all for the ghost the whole way through, right? You don't have any problems with her. If you can make the villain likable in some way, you're winning. You know, it's a good thing to do.
Watch the Joker, make it again.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of the of La Llorona herself, is it? I guess the weeping woman. It means.
Does it? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you know that it's a myth? Like it's a thing.
I assumed it was a myth of some sort, because early on the Mayan sort of housekeeper is saying it's her. So you get a sense that this is some sort of mythological figure that they're all aware of. Yeah. And then of course all but one of them leave the home, and because they don't want to live in a cursed house. Yeah. So yeah, you definitely get that sense, but I didn't know any of the story behind it at all.
No, but the actor who plays, what's her name? Maria Mercedes Caroy?
Yes.
I think.
Yep.
I'd be stuffing that pronunciation up, but
absolutely you are. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks for your support, Maria. I'll go with Maria.
Yeah.
I found that when she entered the film, had quite a bit of presence. She's got an aura about her that I thought was well cast.
Yeah, I agree.
But by the same token, I didn't think she went anywhere with it. You know, it was just a bit like the Rose plays Julia character, who just is this ball of nothingness in the middle of the film. I didn't get all that much fear or nervousness or anything much out of her at all.
You're right, and she just sort of represents the crimes that have been committed by the general. And even though, she turns out to be someone that he's killed in the past and had her children murdered along the way, you don't sense that her story has much of a personal, connection throughout, other than just the horror of knowing that this happened. she's very sort of, she's almost a non-character.
Yeah, it's as though
It's
she's
interesting.
just the personification of this myth that they all, in Guatemala and beyond, I guess probably the Spanish-speaking world, I'd say, she's just the personification of that character
Yes.
in that atrocity situation.
And don't you sort of imagine that this general would have done many other equally horrible things? Like, that's the whole point, right? So it's
of being a general.
Yeah, just that he's sort of, what he's charged with is a genocide. So,
I think she's just representative in that way, though.
she is.
That doesn't bother me.
But maybe that's why, though. Like, if you're going to choose one story out of a whole bunch, I mean, the only other way I could see that could work is a little bit like Flatliners. Do you remember that film?
I haven't seen it. I know the film, but I haven't.
Now, I'm thinking back to the Kevin Bacon
Yeah.
version, where basically the doctors have all been put under to see how long they can die and see if they, see the other side before they're brought back by the other doctors.
That's
but
right.
when they all come back, having gone for, longer times than the last person, they all come back with a ghost from their past, and they're sort of haunted by that ghost. And it sort of felt like it could be that. And maybe if they'd played it a little bit more that way, this whole story could have become a little more interesting. So to do that, you would almost have to have the ghost have more of a story that you could connect to and more of a personality, and for the general to be less sort of just, out. He's sort of not even present really for most of this film. He's just off in his own world. If he had more guilt personally and she had more of a story, then suddenly, there'd be a lot more going on.
Couldn't agree more. And then, well, in a way, you talk about Flatliners and taking it to the edge of what's possible with staying alive.
Yeah,
there was a little bit of that in the underwater scenes. Trying to count how long. She can stay underwater.
I wonder if that's part of the mythology. There's whole idea of the weeping woman taking the children into the pool. Or was this the daughter, taking the daughter into the pool so that she could learn to hold her breath so that she wouldn't drown? It's interesting.
We're missing something.
It
clearly.
It didn't really go anywhere in the end.
Yeah,
but it seemed like it was going to, and it's an interesting detail.
Yeah, I think what we could do here is strip out most of this film and just leave us with the story of this dictator crazy guy's wife and her journey. If you distill it to that, I think you've got a killer film. You're
right. That would be an incredible film. That would be like if more attention was spent just on that and we lost the paranormal element and actually what we were dealing with was her trying to come to terms with her husband's crimes. That's where the interesting part of this film lies.
Yep. Okay, so I think we both agree. You liked it more than me. We both were on the fence.
I was on the fence as well. I didn't love it. This is the weakest of the films that I've seen so far at MIFF.
But a good effort nonetheless. Like I'd commend the filmmakers for many parts of it, and just
absolutely
not as good as the other two.
One final note. One thing I thought was brilliant. This film takes place during civil unrest, and the soundtrack of this film is civil unrest. And I thought that was beautiful. Like the whole way through the film, there's people protesting, and the soundtrack of the film becomes the protesting. And that's just a really great idea. Like really, really well done.
I'm so happy you mentioned that because I meant to. And I was actually going to say it reminds me of The Lighthouse. Because in the Lighthouse, you've got the soundtrack being that the foghorn from the lighthouse, and it's just constant, and you're just living with it through the whole film.
Genius.
And this was the same. Like they're having to live their lives there with constant protest. The sound of that, and that would just do your head in.
It would. I was actually waiting for the wife at some point to just go out and just be like, shut up, you know, just to lose it. And it doesn't happen. But I was waiting for someone to crack because what a thing to live with day in and day out. It's just this.
And they're guiltless. Those 3 generations of women, they've done nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Well, except you could argue the matriarch has turned a blind eye to it.
Yeah. I think she's probably a little guilty, but the others definitely not. Yeah.
I had one last reminds me of, and that was the M. Night. How do you say his surname? I'm so bad at names.
Shyamalan.
Like
yeah.
M. Night's TV series, The Servant. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't seen it. I've been wanting to. Have you seen it?
Yes, I've seen it, and I won't give away anything really, other than a servant comes into the house to serve, and
wreaks havoc.
Yeah, is of dubious help.
Awesome. Oh, I have to see that next. He's made a real turnaround. Do you think this is continuing the trend of him sort of coming back into his own? That show?
Oh, probably.
Do you enjoy it?
Yeah. Probably. There's a few key M. Nighty things. It's good.
In a good way or a bad way?
It's not without its flaws.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting to watch.
Okay, good.
And to, probably the most fun of his films is trying to work out where you are and what, where can I find safe ground to understand this thing. So you are feeling that through a lot of it.
Oh, that's great. Okay, I'm looking forward to that. I think since The Visit, he's really come around, and it's great. Great to see.
Yeah, he's got some good stuff.
I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying the journey. Having seen him descend into complete crap and then sort of pull himself back up again is awesome.
Well, so we're going to do 8 films for this thing at least.
Yes,
for this little MIFF extravaganza.
That's right, and this is 3 in.
This is 3 in, and next one will be, what's it called?
The final part of the dark thriller trilogy, Killing of Two Lovers.
Killing of Two Lovers. So do you have anything else on this film before we wrap it up?
No, I think that covers it all. This is probably not one that if I was going to choose from these bundle of films that we've seen so far, I wouldn't ask, tell people to go off and see it, but it is interesting. There are interesting choices in there, and I see exactly why it's in this festival. There's a lot to like there, but on the whole, I don't think it's the most successful film.
No, I agree completely. I nearly, when I finished it, saw what seemed like a Hollywood version from a few years ago. Have you seen that? Or are you aware of it?
What?
It's called the Curse.
Same title?
I think it's called The Curse of Llorona. Or something like that. So we should have both seen that, and we could have compared it.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, so it would be, it's funny.
Maybe that should be a homework film in a few weeks' time.
I think so. In this case, I think I'd rather see, an Americanized version of the story, I have to say.
Yeah,
so
probably.
I wouldn't normally say that. Interesting.
Yeah, no, I think you might be right. The thing is if you're going to go for something like a paranormal film, there's a lot you got to get right. It's genre. Look, we've sort of talked about genre a little bit, but you can lean on genre to do a lot of really interesting things, but you have to get the key elements right, or else the whole thing doesn't work. So, and I feel like he's missed some of the key elements here.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Doc, love it. Another MIFF film down, and I can't wait to talk about the next one.
Well, I'll see you soon.
All right. Cheers, man. Have a good one.